He awoke next to the Apache chief's daughter. At dawn, 321 warriors awaited the wedding. He awoke slowly, the soft light of dawn filtering through the trees. The forest was quiet, except for the gentle rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird welcoming the new day.
At first, he didn't know where he was.
Bay. His head ached, his body felt stiff, and there was a strange weight in his chest, a mix of confusion and unease. When he opened his eyes fully, he realized he was not alone. A young woman lay beside him, her dark hair spread across the ground like a river of shadows. She was asleep, her breathing steady, unaware of the world awakening around her. Brash. For a moment, he could only stare, frozen by a mixture of surprise and uncertainty. How had he ended up here? He tried to recall the events of the previous day, but everything came back in fragments. He remembered walking through the forest, the uneven ground making his steps awkward, and then a sudden noise that had made him stumble. After that, everything was a blur. There were flashes of movement, the sound of rushing water, and a feeling of being watched. But now, as he sat up, the pieces of the puzzle seemed just out of reach. His mind raced with questions, but none had answers yet. The young woman stirred, stretching slightly, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw him awake, she didn't panic or cry out. Instead, she offered a small, calm smile, almost as if she had expected him to wake. Her presence was comforting and unnerving at the same time. There was a quiet dignity about her, a sense of someone who belonged completely to the forest around them, as if the trees themselves bowed to her presence. He realized that she must be important, someone deeply respected in this place, though he had no way of knowing why. He rose to his feet, careful not to make sudden movements. His body protested with every step, sore from sleeping on the cold ground. Yet he felt compelled to understand where he was. The forest seemed alive in a way he had never experienced before. The sunlight danced through the leaves, creating patterns on the earth, and the air was filled with the scent of wet soil and pine. In the distance he could hear a faint drumming sound, slow and steady, growing louder with each heartbeat. Breath. His pulse quickened, and he instinctively knew that the sound was significant. It was not just music. It was a signal, a call, a warning. The young woman rose beside him, graceful and deliberate. She moved with the confidence of someone who had lived in this forest all her life, someone who knew every stone, every tree, and every hidden path. She did not speak immediately, instead gesturing for him to follow her. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of curiosity and caution, as if she were testing his intentions. He followed, hesitant but trusting, drawn by a force he could not explain. The forest seemed to close around them, the trees forming a natural corridor that led them deeper into the wilderness. Brace. As they walked, he noticed small signs that the forest was inhabited. Footprints in the soft earth, carefully hidden traps, and symbols carved into the bark of certain trees. He realized that this was no ordinary place. It was a territory, carefully protected and maintained by those who lived within it. He tried to imagine what kind of people could survive here, what traditions and rules guided their lives. The young woman seemed at ease, moving silently and swiftly, as if she were one with the land itself. After some time, they reached a clearing. Breath. The sun had risen higher now, casting a warm glow over the open space. It was beautiful, almost magical. Flowers of every color bloomed along the edges, and a small stream ran through the middle, its waters clear and sparkling. Yet, despite the beauty, there was an underlying tension in the air. The faint drumming he had heard earlier was louder now, accompanied by distant chants that carried through the trees. He could feel the energy in the clearing, a mixture of anticipation and solemnity. The young woman turned to him and spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft but firm, commanding attention without demanding it. She explained carefully and slowly that the sound he heard was the gathering of her people. They were waiting. They had been waiting for him. He felt a chill run down his spine. Waiting for him? He could hardly comprehend what she meant. How could a group of people, hidden so deeply in this forest, be waiting for him, and why? She did not give him time to ask questions. Instead, she guided him to a high rock at the edge of the clearing. From there, he could see movement in the distance. Hundreds of figures, dressed in vibrant and elaborate attire, were emerging from the forest paths. He counted them as best he could. 100, 200, and more kept appearing until he realized that there were 321 warriors, each carrying symbols of strength and authority. They moved in unison, their steps measured and precise, creating a rhythm that matched the beating of drums. The sight was overwhelming. He had never been surrounded by such a display of discipline and power. Each warrior seemed alive with purpose, their eyes fixed on the clearing where he and the young woman stood. Yet there was no anger in their gaze, no hostility. Instead, there was expectation, as if they were waiting for something to happen, some signal that would set the course of the day. He felt a mix of fear and fascination. This was a world completely different from his own, a place governed by rules he could not yet understand. The young woman placed a hand gently on his arm. "You are here for a reason," she said. "You must trust yourself and be ready for what comes next." Her words were both reassuring and mysterious. He wanted to ask what she meant, why he was here, what this gathering signified, but the words stuck in his throat. All he could do was nod, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. The wind slowed, the birds quieted, and even the stream's gentle babble seemed to pause. The drumming grew louder, a heartbeat that echoed through the clearing and into his chest. He could feel it resonating, connecting him to something bigger than himself, something ancient and unyielding. The young woman led him to the center of the clearing, and for the first time he saw the full extent of the ceremony unfolding. The warriors formed a wide circle, their faces calm and serious, their eyes unwavering. He realized then that this was no ordinary gathering. This was a ceremony, one that carried meaning beyond anything he had ever experienced. The young woman's presence at his side was no accident. She was guiding him, preparing him for what he must face. He felt a surge of adrenaline and fear, but also a strange sense of belonging. Despite the strangeness of it all, he knew that this moment would change his life forever. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the clearing, he took a deep breath. He looked around at the warriors, at the young woman, at the forest that had become his unexpected home. He did not yet understand everything that was happening, nor could he predict what the day would bring. But he knew one thing with certainty. His life had been irrevocably altered.
Whatever awaited him, he would face it, step by step, with courage and resolve.
And so, with the young woman at his side and the warriors forming a powerful circle around them, he prepared to step into the unknown. The forest seemed alive with anticipation, as if it too were watching, waiting and acknowledging the beginning of a story that would be told for generations. The forest clearing seemed to grow more alive with every passing moment. The soft sunlight danced on the leaves, but it could not ease the tension building in the protagonist's chest. He had never felt anything like this before. The sight of hundreds of warriors moving with perfect harmony, their feet pounding the earth in rhythm with the drums, filled him with awe and fear. Each warrior's face was painted with intricate designs, their expressions serious and focused. Every detail, the feathers in their hair, The patterns on their clothes, the shine of their weapons, spoke of a culture deep with tradition, honor, and strength.
He shifted slightly, glancing at the young woman beside him.
Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the storm of thoughts in his mind. She moved with effortless grace, guiding him gently as they walked toward the center of the clearing. Though he did not yet understand what was happening, he sensed that she was deeply connected to these people. Her every movement seemed to command respect, yet she offered him a quiet reassurance that he was not alone. The drums grew louder, echoing through the forest and vibrating in his chest. The warriors had formed a perfect semicircle, leaving a wide space in the center of the clearing. The sunlight reflected off the polished surfaces of their ceremonial weapons, creating a dazzling, almost magical effect. The protagonist's eyes widened. The numbers were astonishing. 321 warriors, each one disciplined, each one watching him with unwavering attention. He could feel their eyes, not hostile, but expectant, as though they were waiting to see what he would do next. A tall man emerged at the edge of the semicircle. His presence was commanding, yet there was a calmness in his movements. The protagonist instinctively knew that this man was the leader, the one everyone followed without question. The man's eyes met his, and he felt a silent weight pressing down on him. There was no need for words. The chief's gaze alone communicated authority, tradition, and the seriousness of the moment. The young woman stepped forward slightly and spoke. Her voice was soft but carried through the clearing.
"They are here for a ceremony," she explained.
"You are part of it. You must respect it." Narration. "It is not a choice. It is a tradition that has lasted for generations." Her words struck him with the force of reality. He had walked into a world he did not understand, a world governed by rules and customs far older than his own experiences. He tried to speak, to ask questions, but his voice faltered. The chief's daughter placed a gentle hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. Do not fear," she whispered. "You are here for a reason. Trust yourself and respect them." Grace.
"They will guide you." Her words carried reassurance, yet they did little to calm the whirlwind inside him.
He had never been in a situation like this before. His mind raced, thinking of escape, of danger, of what might happen if he failed to show respect. But there was no turning back. The warriors were patient, but he sensed that they expected him to understand, to act with honor. The tall chief raised his hand, and a hush fell over the clearing. The drums slowed, then stopped. Breath. The silence was profound, almost overwhelming. Every bird, every rustle of leaves seemed to pause in respect. The protagonist felt his heart beating faster, echoing in his ears. This was the moment of acknowledgement, the moment that would determine how he would be received by the warriors. The chief spoke, his voice low but powerful. Though he did not speak the language the protagonist fully understood, the meaning was clear through tone, gestures, and the energy of his presence. This was a greeting, an invitation, and a test, all at once. The chief's daughter moved closer, translating through her calm, measured words. "They honor you," she said, "but you must show them respect in return. The ceremony will begin, and you must participate. Do not resist. Do not run. This is a moment of joining, of trust, of understanding." The protagonist nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He tried to focus on breathing, steadying himself, even as every nerve in his body screamed with tension and anticipation. From the outer edges of the clearing, other members of the tribe began to arrive. They were not warriors, but women, elders, and children, all observing quietly from a respectful distance. The clearing seemed to grow larger as more people appeared, their presence adding to the gravity of the moment. The protagonist realized that this was not just a gathering of strength, but a community coming together, bound by shared history, culture, and purpose. He felt the weight of their expectations, the responsibility of standing in the center of their world. The warriors began a new rhythm, stamping their feet and beating their chests. The sound was powerful, resonating deep in his bones. It was not meant to intimidate him, though at first it felt that way. It was a declaration of tradition, a call to witness and honor what was about to occur. He watched as the chief gestured to the young woman, who stepped forward with grace and confidence. She wore ceremonial attire, a vibrant blend of colors and patterns that told stories he could not yet read. Her eyes met his, conveying reassurance, strength, and the quiet insistence that he rise to the moment. The protagonist took a deep breath and followed her movements. He lifted his head, squared his shoulders, and walked toward the center of the clearing, feeling every eye upon him. The earth beneath his feet seemed solid and alive, grounding him even as his heart raced. The warriors watched intently, some nodding in silent approval, others maintaining the stern expressions that spoke of centuries of tradition. He felt a mixture of fear, awe, and a strange exhilaration. He was a stranger in a world he barely understood, yet he was being accepted, even if tentatively, into something far greater than himself. The chief stepped closer, his gaze never leaving the protagonist's face. He gestured to one of the warriors who approached carrying a ceremonial staff. The staff was intricately carved, symbols of strength and protection running along its length. The warrior handed it to the protagonist with a solemn bow. The weight of the staff surprised him. It was heavier than he expected, but it felt significant. This was more than an object. It was a symbol, a representation of the trust and responsibility now placed upon him. The chief spoke again, this time using gestures that the protagonist could interpret more clearly. He was being invited to participate in a ritual, to acknowledge the community, and to demonstrate respect for their traditions. The young woman guided him patiently, showing him the movements, the stance, and the way to hold the staff. Every motion mattered. Every expression counted. The protagonist concentrated, repeating the gestures in careful imitation, aware that any mistake could have consequences, not just for himself, but for the trust he was beginning to build. As he moved through the ceremonial steps, he began to notice subtle reactions among the warriors. Some murmured softly, others exchanged approving glances. He could feel a shift, a growing sense of acceptance, as if each correct movement, each respectful gesture was weaving him into the fabric of the community. The young woman's presence was steadying, reminding him that he was not alone, that he had an ally and guide through this unfamiliar world. The clearing seemed to come alive with energy as the ceremony continued. The warriors' movements became more intricate, the rhythm of the drums more complex, and the air seemed charged with purpose. The protagonist felt his own heartbeat syncing with the rhythm, his initial fear gradually transforming into focus and determination. He realized that this was more than a test. It was an initiation, a bridge between his world and theirs, a moment that would define how he would be remembered. By the time the sun was fully above the trees, casting golden light over the clearing, the protagonist felt a sense of calm settle over him. He had survived the first stage of the ceremony, demonstrated respect, and earned a tentative acknowledgement from the warriors. Yet he knew that this was only the beginning. The day was far from over, and the true test of courage, understanding, and commitment had yet to come. Still, as he stood in the center of the clearing, with the chief's daughter at his side and 321 warriors surrounding them, he felt a quiet pride. He had taken the first step into a world he did not fully understand, and he was ready to face whatever came next. The drums resumed, softer now, more melodic, signaling a transition in the ceremony. The warriors shifted positions, creating new patterns in the clearing, their eyes never leaving him. The young woman turned to him briefly, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. "You are doing well," she said. "But remember, Respect is only the beginning. Bah. Understanding and courage will come next. He nodded, absorbing her words, aware that this day would challenge him in ways he could not yet imagine. And so, surrounded by the rhythm of drums, the vibrant colors of ceremonial attire, and the focused gaze of 321 warriors, he prepared for the next stage of the day. The forest seemed to watch, the wind carrying whispers of ancient stories, the sun casting light on a clearing filled with expectation, respect, and the promise of events that would change his life forever. As the sun climbed higher, the forest clearing seemed to hum with life and purpose. The protagonist stood in the center, still holding the ceremonial staff, and watched the warriors around him. But in expectation, and it made his heart pound. He had completed the first part of the ceremony, showing respect and following the rituals correctly, yet he could sense that something more significant awaited him. The weight of responsibility pressed on his shoulders. Every movement, every choice, felt like it mattered not just to him, but to everyone gathered in that sacred space. He looked at the young woman standing beside him. Her calm expression and quiet confidence had been a source of reassurance so far, yet he noticed a subtle tension in her eyes. She, too, seemed aware that the day was far from over. Her gaze met his briefly, and he saw a flicker of understanding. She knew the challenges he faced, and she knew the courage he would need. For the first time, he realized that this was not just a ceremonial greeting or test. It was a moment that would define him, a point of no return, a step into a world he had only glimpsed, but now had to navigate. The chief stepped closer, his gaze steady and unwavering. With deliberate movements, he gestured for the protagonist to follow him. The young woman offered a soft nod, silently encouraging him. The clearing seemed to grow still, the air heavy with anticipation. Even the warriors, who had been moving and chanting earlier, paused in their rhythm, creating a moment of complete silence. It was as though the forest itself had paused to witness what was about to unfold. As he walked beside the chief, the protagonist's mind raced. Questions tumbled over one another. What was expected of him next? How could he prove himself worthy of the respect already shown? Could he truly understand these people, their ways, and their values in such a short time? The questions felt overwhelming, yet he knew he could not stop. The chief's presence was commanding but not cruel, and he sensed that this journey was as much about inner growth as it was about external ceremony. They reached a smaller, secluded area of the clearing, where symbols of the tribe's history were carved into stones and trees.
The chief paused and gestured toward the symbols.
The protagonist studied them, noticing patterns, images of past warriors, of important ceremonies, and of moments celebrated and honored across generations. He could feel the weight of history in the carvings, the legacy of a people who had lived in harmony with the land for centuries. A strange awe filled him. He realized that this day, these rituals, and this moment were not only a test of courage, but a lesson in understanding and respect. The young woman stepped closer and whispered, "These symbols are their stories, their truths. To honor them is to honor those who came before."
You must see beyond what you feel and act with understanding.
He nodded, absorbing her words. They seemed simple, yet the depth behind them was clear. Respect alone was not enough. He needed insight, empathy, and the courage to face the unknown with humility. The chief then led him to a platform made of polished wood, raised slightly above the ground. Here the warriors had placed ceremonial objects, feathers, beads, and stones, each representing values like bravery, loyalty, and wisdom. The protagonist's eyes widened as he realized the significance. Every object carried meaning, every gesture mattered, and his next steps would show whether he could rise to the expectations placed upon him. He took a deep breath and reached for the objects, carefully handling each one as the chief observed. He could feel the energy of the warriors surrounding him, their collective focus sharpening his awareness. The young woman guided him quietly, showing him how to hold the objects, how to position them, and how to move with intention. It was a delicate balance of action and stillness, respect and understanding, and he concentrated on every movement, aware that any mistake could change the course of the ceremony. As he continued, a wave of self-doubt washed over him. He thought of his life before this moment, of the ordinary days and familiar routines that seemed so distant now. Could he really belong here, in this world so different from his own? Could he honor these people, understand their ways, and prove himself worthy of their trust?
The questions made his hands shake, but the chief's steady gaze reminded him to focus, to act with presence and intention.
The young woman placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, and he felt a surge of determination. He could not fail, not because of pride, but because respect and understanding demanded it. The warriors began a low chant, their voices deep and steady, filling the clearing with a sense of solemnity and gravity. The sound resonated in his chest, and he felt a connection forming, not just to the people around him, but to the land itself. It was as though the forest, the stones, the trees, and the stream had all come together to bear witness to his actions. The young woman's presence was a constant anchor, reminding him to move with purpose, to act with courage, and to understand the significance of every gesture. Suddenly, one of the warriors stepped forward, carrying a small ornate mask. The chief gestured toward the protagonist, and the young woman translated in a whisper. "This mask is a test of spirit. You must wear it and show that you can face what is unfamiliar with respect and bravery." His heart pounded in his chest. The mask seemed heavier than it appeared, not physically, but with the weight of meaning it carried. He could feel the eyes of all 321 warriors on him, watching, waiting, and evaluating. With trembling hands, he took the mask and placed it on his face. Instantly, the world seemed different. His vision was limited. The air felt closer, and every sound was amplified. He felt vulnerable, exposed, and yet strangely empowered. The young woman guided him through a series of movements, steps that seemed awkward at first, but gradually became more fluid. The warrior's chanting provided rhythm, helping him find balance and confidence.
Every step was a lesson in trust, courage, and awareness, and he felt himself growing stronger with each movement.
As he completed the ritual with the mask, the chief nodded, and the warrior's chants shifted into a rhythm of approval. The protagonist removed the mask, breathing heavily but feeling a sense of accomplishment. For the first time, he felt that he was not just an outsider. He was participating, learning, and beginning to belong, even if only partially. The young woman's eyes shone with pride, and he realized that she had been guiding him not only through the ceremony, but through his own fear and doubt. The day continued with more rituals, each designed to test different qualities: patience, humility, and empathy. The protagonist was asked to perform tasks that required careful observation, to show respect for the environment, and to demonstrate understanding of the warrior's traditions. Each step was a lesson, each movement a bridge between his world and theirs. He stumbled at times, unsure or hesitant, but the warriors responded not with anger, but with patience and guidance. Their acceptance was not blind. It was earned through effort, attention, and genuine respect. By mid-afternoon, the protagonist began to notice a change within himself. The fear that had gripped him earlier was replaced by focus and determination. He had come to the forest as a stranger, uncertain and overwhelmed. But now he felt a sense of purpose. He was beginning to understand that this experience was not only about proving himself to the warriors, but also about discovering his own strength, patience, and courage. The young woman's steady presence reinforced this realization, showing him that trust and guidance could make even the most unfamiliar world navigable. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the clearing, the chief called the warriors to attention. The protagonist and the young woman stood side by side, facing the 321 warriors. He felt a deep sense of connection, a bond formed not through words but through shared experience, respect, and understanding. He realized that the day had been a test not only of bravery, but of heart and mind, a test of his willingness to learn, to honor, and to participate fully in a world unlike his own. For the first time, he allowed himself a quiet smile. He had faced fear, confusion, and doubt, and he had come through with strength, patience, and respect. The chief's daughter squeezed his hand gently, acknowledging his growth and courage. The warriors began a slow, steady chant once more, and he felt the forest pulse with energy, approval, and anticipation. The day was far from over, but he knew that he had passed an important part of the journey. He was no longer just a stranger. He was a participant in a story that had been unfolding for generations, and he was beginning to understand his place within it. The sun had begun its descent, casting long, golden streaks across the forest clearing. The protagonist could feel the anticipation in the air, a tangible energy that seemed to hum between the warriors and the forest itself. Though he had survived the earlier rituals and begun to feel a sense of belonging, he sensed that the most critical part of the day was still ahead. The chief's eyes met his once more, steady and unwavering, as though silently challenging him to rise to the next stage. The young woman's hand rested lightly on his arm, grounding him and offering quiet reassurance. She whispered, "This is the test of courage. Everything you have learned so far will guide you, but now you must face the trial itself." The clearing shifted as the warriors began to move, creating a pathway that led to the edge of the forest. The protagonist could see that the path was lined with obstacles, fallen logs, narrow trails, and uneven stones.
Each obstacle was symbolic, representing challenges of strength, patience, and wisdom.
The chief gestured for him to proceed, and though his legs trembled slightly, he took a step forward, gripping the ceremonial staff tightly.
He realized that the test was not just physical. It required focus, respect, and the ability to adapt to the unexpected.
As he moved along the path, the first challenge became clear. A series of logs had been arranged across a shallow stream, requiring balance and careful steps. One misstep could mean a fall into the cold, rushing water below. The warriors watched silently, their eyes sharp but patient, as if understanding that fear and hesitation were natural. The young woman stayed by his side, offering guidance without taking control, letting him find his own strength. He placed one foot carefully, then the next, feeling the stability of each log before moving forward. Every careful step was a small victory, a lesson in patience and precision. Once he crossed the logs, the next challenge presented itself. A narrow trail along a steep incline, flanked by dense shrubs and thorny branches, the path seemed almost impossible, forcing him to slow his pace and focus entirely on each movement. He remembered the lessons of observation and respect he had learned from the earlier rituals. Rather than forcing his way through, he adjusted his posture, moving deliberately and gently parting the branches rather than tearing through them. The forest seemed to acknowledge his effort as though the trees themselves softened their hold, allowing him to pass. When he finally reached solid ground again, he felt a surge of accomplishment. The trial was teaching him more than physical skill. It was teaching him mindfulness, humility, and perseverance. The chief signaled for the next stage of the test. The protagonist noticed a small clearing up ahead where a series of markings and symbols had been arranged on the ground. Each symbol represented a value: loyalty, honor, compassion, courage. The chief stepped aside, motioning for the protagonist to select and engage with them in order.
The young woman whispered, "These are not just symbols. They are principles."
How you respond to each will show your understanding and your heart. He nodded, understanding that this trial was not only of skill and bravery but of character. He approached the first symbol, representing courage. A shallow pit had been dug, and within it lay sharp stones carefully concealed by dirt.
He was instructed to reach across the pit and retrieve a token without touching the stones.
His hands trembled slightly as he carefully moved, using both focus and gentle movements. When he successfully retrieved the token, he felt a rush of relief and pride. The warrior's soft murmurs of approval reassured him, and he began to understand that courage was not just about bold action. It was about calm, thoughtful, and deliberate choices in the face of difficulty.
The next symbol represented loyalty.
The task required him to assist a warrior in carrying a bundle of logs across the clearing. At first, he hesitated, unsure if his strength was sufficient. But he remembered the lessons of teamwork and respect he had observed earlier.
He lifted the logs with care, coordinating his movements with the warrior, matching his pace and effort.
The task tested not just strength, but his ability to cooperate and trust another. When the bundle was successfully delivered, he felt a sense of unity with the warrior, and, by extension, the entire group. Loyalty was more than a word. It was action, commitment, and support. The symbol representing compassion was subtler, requiring a quiet attentiveness. A small wounded bird had been placed gently on a leaf. The protagonist was instructed to approach without startling it, to observe, and then to provide comfort and care using the natural elements around him. Breaths. He gently cupped the bird in his hands, covering it with soft leaves and murmuring reassuring words. Though he felt awkward at first, he remembered the quiet guidance of the young woman and the respect shown by the warriors. By the time the bird fluttered away safely, he understood that compassion required patience, empathy, and a willingness to act selflessly. Finally, he approached the symbol representing honor, Brandis. Here, he was asked to make a choice, whether to advance alone or to invite a warrior to accompany him across a narrow bridge spanning a small ravine, but prove himself entirely on his own. But recalling the lessons of respect, teamwork, and humility, he chose to invite a warrior sharing the responsibility and demonstrating trust. The warrior accepted, and together they crossed the bridge carefully, step by step. When they reached solid ground again, the chief's eyes gleamed with approval. Breath. Honor, he realized, was not just about individual achievement, but about integrity, wisdom, and acknowledgement of others. The trial continued, becoming increasingly demanding. He was asked to navigate through a labyrinth of natural obstacles, to find markers hidden among trees and rocks, and to demonstrate careful observation, endurance, and perseverance. Each stage was accompanied by the silent presence of the warriors, their attentive gaze encouraging him, never mocking or discouraging. The young woman remained at his side, guiding gently, reminding him of lessons already learned, and reinforcing the trust and understanding that had begun to form. As he progressed through the trial, he felt his confidence grow. His fear had not disappeared, but it had been replaced by focus, determination, and a sense of purpose. Each successful challenge was not only a step forward in the ceremony, but a step forward in understanding himself. He realized that the test was not designed to intimidate or punish, but to teach, to reveal his strengths, his patience, and his ability to navigate the unknown with respect and courage. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the clearing. The final stage of the trial approached, a narrow ledge above a shallow ravine, where he was asked to carry a ceremonial flame from one side to the other without letting it extinguish. The flame represented life, responsibility, and the balance of courage and care. The wind picked up slightly, and the flame flickered as he held it in both hands. His legs trembled, and the ground beneath him felt unsteady, but he focused on his breath, the rhythm of his steps, and the careful alignment of his body. Step by step he moved across the ledge, feeling the weight of every moment. The young woman's voice, calm and supportive, reminded him to remain steady. The warrior's eyes followed his progress, their presence both comforting and motivating. With a final careful step, he reached the other side, placing the flames safely on a stone altar. Relief and pride surged through him, and for a moment he allowed himself to smile. He had completed the test, faced fear, uncertainty, and challenge, and emerged not only successful but transformed. The chief stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with respect. He raised a hand signaling approval and acknowledgement. The warriors responded with a deep, resonant chant, filling the forest with sound and energy. The young woman embraced the protagonist lightly, her expression full of pride and encouragement. He felt a deep connection with her, the chief and the warriors, not just as a participant in a ceremony, but as a part of a shared experience, bound by understanding, respect, and courage. As the chants faded, the clearing seemed to exhale, the tension dissolving into a quiet, harmonious energy. The protagonist realized that the test of courage had not just been about physical trials or ceremonial gestures. It had been about inner strength, resilience, humility, and the willingness to engage fully with a world he had barely known hours before. The day had tested him in every way, body, mind, and spirit, and he had passed not by chance but through focus, respect, and growth. The first light of dawn broke through the forest canopy, spilling soft golden hues across the clearing. The air was still, calm, and filled with a quiet sense of anticipation. The protagonist stood at the center holding the ceremonial staff once more, his heart beating steadily. After the trials, the lessons, and the tests, he finally felt ready to face the culmination of the day, the wedding ceremony.
Around him, the 321 warriors had formed a wide circle, their expressions solemn but celebratory. The rhythm of the drums returned, slow and deliberate, echoing the heartbeat of the forest itself.
The young woman, the chief's daughter, stepped beside him. Her ceremonial attire glimmered in the dawn light, adorned with intricate beads, feathers, and patterns that spoke of her people's history and honor. She looked at him with gentle pride and understanding, conveying silently that he had grown and proven himself through courage, respect, and determination. He felt a swell of admiration and affection for her, realizing that this day had bonded them not only through ceremony but through shared challenge and trust. The chief emerged at the edge of the circle, walking with a calm authority. His gaze swept over the clearing, resting briefly on each warrior to acknowledge their presence before settling on the young couple in the center. The ceremony was about to begin. He raised a hand, and a hush fell over the gathering. Even the forest seemed to pause. The birds quieted, the wind softened, and the gentle babble of the stream seemed to fade into silence. Despair, every eye, every breath, and every movement carried significance. The protagonist felt the weight and honor of the moment pressing upon him. The chief spoke slowly and deliberately, his words echoing with meaning even to someone who did not fully understand the language. The young woman translated in a calm, gentle voice, explaining that the chief was offering blessings to both of them, acknowledging their courage, respect, and the unity they had achieved. The protagonist listened carefully, absorbing not only the words but the spirit behind them. He realized that this ceremony was not merely a tradition. It was a bridge, a connection between two people and the entire community, built on mutual respect and trust. The warriors began a chant, soft at first, then growing in strength and volume. The rhythm of the drums matched their words, creating a resonance that filled every corner of the clearing. The protagonist felt the vibrations in his chest, a reminder that he was no longer an outsider, but a part of this world, however briefly.
He looked at the young woman and saw the same awe reflected in her eyes.
Though she had grown up in this world, even she seemed moved by the gravity and beauty of the ceremony. Together they stepped forward, moving in rhythm with the ritual, their hands brushing lightly, a silent promise of partnership and understanding. The chief gestured toward the ceremonial objects placed in the center of the clearing, feathers, stones, and beads arranged with care and intention. The young woman picked up a small bundle and handed one to the protagonist. He took it respectfully, feeling its significance. It symbolized commitment, honor, and the blending of his journey with the traditions and values of her people. The warriors watched closely, their attention unwavering but not threatening. Their presence was both acknowledgement and support, a living reminder of the community's role in this union. The ceremony continued with gestures of mutual respect. The couple exchanged vows, not in words alone, but in actions. They offered each other symbolic tokens moved with purpose and intention, and demonstrated the understanding and care they had developed throughout the day. The protagonist marveled at the depth of meaning behind each gesture. Every movement, no matter how small, represented a promise of respect, partnership, and honor. He realized that the ceremony was as much about their bond as it was about the community's recognition of it. The warriors stepped forward in sequence, each offering a silent acknowledgement of the union. They touched the ceremonial objects or performed subtle gestures of blessing, their faces calm but expressive. The rhythm of their movements created a pattern that seemed to connect the couple to the entire circle. It was a powerful reminder that this wedding was not just a personal commitment, but a joining with a larger family, a history, and a way of life.
The protagonist felt both humility and pride.
He had come from a world entirely different from this one, yet through courage, respect, and understanding, he had found his place, if only for a moment. The young woman's eyes met his again, and he saw a depth of emotion that words could not convey. She had guided him, encouraged him, and trusted him throughout the day. And now, in the quiet strength of dawn, she shared this most significant moment with him. He reached out and took her hand fully in his own, feeling the warmth, the reassurance, and the bond that had grown between them. Together they faced the circle of warriors, the forest, and the rising sun, ready to complete the ceremony. The chief stepped forward once more, raising his arms high. The warriors responded in unison with a powerful chant that filled the clearing, vibrating through the trees and into the very ground beneath their feet. The protagonist felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, pride, and awe swelling inside him. He understood then that this was not the end of a test, but the beginning of a journey. The ceremony was a promise of what could be built when courage, respect, and understanding came together in harmony. As the sun climbed higher, casting brighter light over the gathering, the young woman and the protagonist completed the final gestures of the ritual. They exchanged a symbolic binding of hands, intertwining them with cords that represented unity, trust, and shared purpose. The warriors responded with rhythmic stamping of their feet, a final chorus of approval and celebration. The clearing seemed to glow with energy, the forest itself alive with the recognition of the union. He felt the enormity of the moment, the presence of history, and the connection to everyone around him. For a long moment the clearing was silent, except for the soft rustling of the forest and the gentle murmur of the stream. The protagonist looked around at the 321 warriors, the elders, and the children. He saw not only their respect, but their acknowledgement of his journey. The courage he had shown, the respect he had earned, and the understanding he had demonstrated. He realized that the community's acceptance was not given lightly, but had been earned through every trial, every careful gesture, and every thoughtful action he had taken that day. The chief placed a hand lightly on the young woman's shoulder and then on the protagonist's, a final blessing of approval and recognition. The warriors chanted softly, a lull of celebration and peace, and the clearing seemed to exhale. The day's tension melted into a shared sense of joy, honor, and harmony. The protagonist felt a deep sense of completion, as if a circle had been closed, yet also a sense of new beginnings. This was the start of something enduring, built on courage, respect, and the bonds formed in the forest clearing at dawn. The young woman leaned slightly toward him, her voice gentle but full of meaning. "You have honored the traditions, faced the trials, and shown courage and respect. You are now part of this moment, and this moment is part of you, Bruce." Her words resonated deeply within him, but he understood that this ceremony was more than a ritual. It was a lesson in life, a reminder of the strength found in courage, the wisdom in respect, and the beauty of understanding across worlds. As the first rays of full sunlight bathed the clearing, he took a final look around. The warriors stood in silent acknowledgement, their faces calm but full of life. The forest seemed to shimmer with energy, the birds resumed their songs, and the streams sparkled in the morning light. He felt a deep sense of connection to the young woman beside him, to the warriors, and to the forest itself. For the first time that day he allowed himself to relax fully, knowing he had honored the day, the ceremony, and the people who had welcomed him so completely. The couple walked together to the edge of the clearing, hand in hand, taking in the beauty of the forest and the warmth of the rising sun. Though the day had been filled with fear, challenge, and uncertainty, it had ended in celebration, understanding, and unity. The protagonist understood that this was a moment he would carry forever, a story of courage, respect, and the extraordinary bond that can form when two worlds meet with open hearts. And as the clearing filled with light, the drums quieted and the warriors slowly dispersed, he knew that this day had transformed him. He had stepped into the unknown, faced trials that tested every part of him, and emerged not only stronger but wiser. Pace. He had found trust, respect, and even a connection of the heart. The forest around him seemed to whisper a quiet acknowledgement, a blessing for what had been, and for what was still to come. In that moment, standing beside the young woman, surrounded by the echoes of ceremony and courage, he knew that he had become part of something greater, a story of life, honor, and the power of human connection that would be remembered long after the dawn faded into day.